Hello, lovely people. Hope you're doing marvelously well. So this is my portion of the course that I'm doing with Ken. Does that make sense? The song City Lights is by David Osterdaat. The band is called the Workday Release. It was originally a band, although all of the songs were written by David. I think over the years it's sort of morphed into him more as a solo artist, a bit like Dashboard Confessional. You know, you've essentially got one solo artist driving it. Now, Ken mixes entirely in the box. Now, obviously, he started off on consoles and then graduated towards that. And I believe this is going to be a really interesting course. I don't know if he was referencing my mix. I know that when I did my mixing in the box course with Love Me, I'm Rich, I don't know if any of you have got that. I mixed it entirely in the box, but I did reference my SSL mix. I also know that when Chris stored Algae, when Chris did the Stephen Slate stuff, he also referenced his mix and then mixed in the box. So the bottom line is, you know, I mean, a good mix is a great mix. And it's nice, you know, professionally speaking, when you're given tracks to have a really amazing mix, or at least a really great rough mix to reference from, to beat. So I don't think it's necessarily cheating, but I wonder if he did or not. Okay, he probably treated my mix like a rough mix. Now, my mix is mixed in a hybrid fashion through a console. It's quite organic, although there are, as you can see, a couple of samples. There's one kick sample and two snare samples. Otherwise, everything else is live. I also did a shell mic, which is a U87 on the side of the snare. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the production first of all. As you know, I mix in a hybrid fashion, but this was recorded completely analog, in as much as, you know, it's in Pro Tools, but it was recorded through one console, the Sunset Sound console in Studio 3. Now, I've done tons of stuff in there, at least 3 or 4 different video segments, and you can download different tracks, and Academy members will have multiple ones. We've had United recordings, we've had my old studio, 2 of my old studios, plus Sunset, plus plenty of other rooms. So you've got to hear different places. But there's something unique about this. This is Blair, and it was originally Sean Hurley playing bass. However, I retracked the bass, and it wasn't because Sean played it badly, it's because I ultimately wanted more energy from it. You can tell it's me playing the pick. It was recorded here. It was definitely using my Mexican jazz bass. And these claps are me, David, Sean, and Blair out in the live room. And there's 4 sets of them. Cool. And then, of course, there's live drums, 1 kick sample, 1 snare sample. Now, obviously, you've got the song. You can listen to the mix. But let's do a quick talk through on it. One of the main things is this track here, which is Tim Pierce's ambient track. That's coming out output 15 and 16 on the console. And there's a spread on it just to create a little width. Now, those of you that follow me know I'm not a big fan of using widening plugins, but this is a mono source, and I just wanted it to feel, I wanted to get out of the way of the middle where we've got, you know, lead vocal, bass guitar, kick and snare almost exclusively live. And I just wanted to get it out of that way. And so the widening is just giving you a little bit of that, but that was it. There's no extra reverbs or delays, it's all Tim. So let's start with the drums. Now, this is Sunset Sound, it's beautiful mics. If you've watched any of my drum recording videos from Sunset, you'll know what I do. If we listen to it without any samples, this is what we got. Add in the kick sample, the snare sample. I would argue the kick isn't doing a huge amount, the kick sample, it's mainly live kick. but that snare sample's quite. A couple of things. You can really hear the reverb on that snare that's been added. That's probably more than anything else. If I turn it off, back on, it's quite a big difference. Now, you've heard me talk about this a million times before, but this is an Andy Wallace trick. I've probably talked about it for about 3 years now. But Andy will trigger reverb from the snare sample. Even if the snare sample isn't very loud, he'll trigger it from the sample. Why does he do that? Obviously, it's as simple as snare, bleed into the snare mic. If you use the sample to trigger it, you're going to get a lot of breadth, a lot of depth, sorry, and you're not going to get all that bleed, which could really, really mess it up. However, that being said, I did print, let's find it down here, a plate. So that's live. As we were printing drums, you see it's in the drum group, I printed that. There's also a talkback mic here, which is just a room mic in the middle. So faint, it's barely audible. Okay, so we'll go through one by one. All right, kick in is here. There is no specific EQ on this. There's a time adjuster, which those of you that have followed me or watched any of my other videos will know what I do. I am literally just pulling that back. If you see here, I'm pulling it back to match the furthest away kick. In fact, actually, oh, that's the Coles. The Coles is not being used in quite the same way. The kick in is essentially what I'm using. So I'm actually taking the kick in and the kick out and getting those fairly close. Let's have a look. Yeah, it says 85, 88. Here, 107. I mean, you can mess with it, but it's bringing it back just a little bit. The kick out, I actually put an R bass on. Take it off. Just adding a little bit more low. I've got a little 2.5 just for a little click on it, and that is it. Now that's going through, the kick in is going through input 1 on the console, and that is triggering a DBX 120, which is giving us like the super lows. And the sub, the DBX 120 sub gives us that little extra. Now the Kickmaster itself has a bit, you see up to 5 or 6 dBs worth of compression. Actually quite a lot. Coles is barely audible. So it's, the addictive is actually features quite heavily. It's a big part of the sound. It's matched. I like that. There's a little bit of not quite the polarity being exactly right in this, to be honest. It sounds like the kick in and the addictive kick give us the most amount of bottom end. And then this kick out is a little squirrely. This is typical. It's like, mess around with this and see what you need. I would go for something quite organic. I wasn't going for something with like super low thump. I think now on reflection, coming back to this song, I might put a little bit more low end on it, and I might favor the addictive and the kick in. Maybe that's a suggestion when you come to mix. That sounds pretty darn good. If anything, some of the low end's gone when I put the kick out in there. Little phase. And the Coles is almost irrelevant. So strange enough, if I turn that all off, that's the drums without the kick out. Kind of prefer it. So there you go. Here I'm recalling this mix and I'm noticing things like that. This is really good discussion points. I love this kind of stuff. Okay, so moving down, there is a kick room on it, and that's being actually coming off of the kick out. There's also a fake room, which I always create, and that fake room is down the bottom here, and that is a... Now, here's a good characteristic, something we should zoom in and check out here. You can do this using an EQ, or you can do it with a reverb inside of an EQ. This is very, very common for me. I don't like to have multiple ways of getting low end. One of those issues can be with reverbs. When you have reverbs with decent decay times, like this one's pretty short. It's actually 0.65 of a second. However, it's still reverb. And if I have a lot of low end on there, not only will I get a kick going boom, I'll get a boom. I'll get this kind of like excessive amount of low end, which when he's playing fast, he's doing this 4 on the floor, just kind of go, just rumble along and get a lot of undefined low end. So with the reverb, very often, and almost always on kick, I will roll off the low end. I will high pass it. And here it's quite aggressive. It's at 108, and you see it's quite aggressive here. So, you know, but you could put an EQ into a reverb or an EQ after a reverb. I usually would put it into it, but and then there's an MV2 here, one of my favorite plugins, as you know. So let's go to the fake room. Let's go to the kick, sorry, going into the fake room. So it's not super loud, but it's just bringing a little bit of ambience into it. Now I usually, yeah, it seems like on the Addictive Snare, I've got just a different reverb set up for that. Actually, it's got 11 and 12. Just to edit this so it makes more sense. Okay, maybe edit this a little tighter. Now on 11, it's got 11 and 12 here going to the Addictive Snare reverb here. Now I've got an EQ, I'm boosting the mid-range on this, going into a D-verb, 750 milliseconds, and more mid-range and more high-end. So it's just a little, something more, you know, a little bit more ugly. Take the EQ off. Back on. Just a bit more aggression in that mid-range. Cool. So back to the next natural. See, as you can see, not that much going on with plugins. Now there's time adjuster on the snares, and that's because they're all a little bit slightly different. As you can see, the one that's on the shell, which is the bottom of these three here, it's going to be a little later than the close mic. So the time adjuster is not only dragging it back in phase, it's also dragging it back to the overheads. Now I do this a lot, and this will confuse people, and not everybody relates to this. So, but I like my snare and my overheads to be in phase. I like to measure them from the snare. If you watched any of my drum recording videos, you'll know I do that. So what I do is I have the overheads measured in phase at the same distance away to the snare. So when the snare hits, you can see here, it's pretty darn good. It's seeing it both at the same time. But then I will drag my snare back. So my time adjuster here is at 124 samples. And that's bringing it back, you know, on average. See, I've got like, yeah, 135, 130. It's like, they're all roughly, that says 132. I just brought it back roughly in time with that. But the difference is quite massive. If you listen to all of the snares and the overheads. Take off the time adjuster. Put it back on. try one, just the snare top. Just a little snappier, tiny bit. Sometimes it makes a huge difference, sometimes it's subtle, and this one's a little subtle. Now, on my right-hand overhead, we got, while we were tracking, I think I talked about this before, but we got a little bit of a DC offset. Now, what is that? Now, what happens sometimes is you get consoles. Most consoles are feeding phantom, sometimes all the time, which is on ribbon mics, you have to sometimes put something in there to alleviate the phantom so it doesn't hit the ribbon mics. And that can sometimes cause an issue where it creates DC offset and there's current running in it. And I believe we didn't notice this till it was a little bit too late, but you see here, see this bottom right one here? It doesn't overly affect the overhead sounds. They still sound fantastic. I've just high passed them at 199. But there is a little mini DC offset going on there. Again, you know, I've dealt with a lot worse issues, but yeah, definitely was a little bit of an, it's more of a visual thing than it is an actual sonic thing. Okay, so what do we got? On these live snares, going back to those one at a time, we've got the time adjuster dragging them back to the overheads. We've got a little high boost on the snare top. Not quite as aggressive high boost on the snare bottom, but we've also got an R comp. Which is actually sidechaining from the kick. Which I'm actually not interested in. I'm taking it off. I don't need it. But I'll do that often. What I'll do, the reason why I don't want to do it is because it's 4 on the floor and it's sidechaining the snare. It might be reducing a little bit of the flam, but I don't like it. It's not working for me. But I will do that from time to time. Now what about the R comp on here? Let's do it on the shell. Yeah, take it off that too. So the reason why I do that, and it doesn't make sense in this instance because the 4 on the floor, what's happening is the kick is sidechaining with the snare. So every time the kick plays, it compresses the snare. Now that is good when you've got like a kick, snare, a kick, kick, snare, kick, snare, a kick, kick, snare. But when you've got kick, snare, you know, kick, snare, kick, snare, kick, snare, kick, snare. When you've got that, what's happening is the snare is going to get quieter and it will sound like it's going slack, crack, crack. Not a good idea. So it may have been something I was experimenting with, but it's gone. It has now gone. There's good reasons to do it quite often. I do it on the snare often if there's excessive compression going on the recording of the snare, which some people do. They'll put a 57 on a snare and then compress the schnizzle out. Put an 1176 or a distress across it, and they'll suck so much energy out of the snare that starts bad. But also between every snare, that kick, snare, kick, kick. So that kick is like super loud inside of the snare drum. So, you know, it's things like that that we have to watch. I don't think there's an excessive problem. I mean, listening to the snare shell, there's a bit of bleed, but I don't care. In the real sense, it's not a huge amount. All right, so next up is the floor tom. Now, the only thing with the toms, oh, and the live snare reverb is interesting. It's got a compressor across it, an MV2 for level, an REQ. I pulled out some of the oing, oing, which is at 650, and then I'm using a true verb, and I'm boosting a lot of top end on it. So I'm making the snare reverb super bright. That seemed to make sense to me. Again, it's really up to you how you want to present the drum sound. But for me, I wanted that kind of like brighter snare. And that's the live snare sound. We can, here you go, have a listen. Not overly loud. I can bring it up for a second. Automated bell. But it's super quiet. And it's got a couple of bumps like here where there's a drum fill. Not a huge amount. It's automated on the tom verb. You know, there's some subtle things going on in this. All right, so now the floor tom, pretty natural sound, but I did some stuff to it. Did some time adjuster, so I brought it back in phase, polarity with the overheads. Now there are plugins that do this. I am a little reluctant to use plugins that, when I say plugins, like ability of time stretching tracks to get the phase perfect. I find that sometimes what happens is the drum sounds smaller. But if that's the way you work, just make sure you playlist the drums so you have the original ones to compare. But you might find if you do that, you get kind of introduce some weird phase issues. I personally don't do it, but you can if you wish. Okay, so there's time adjuster, pushing it back to the overheads. Then there's a roll off at 78. Now, a high pass. Now, the reason why am I high passing at 78? Because once I boost some low lows, which I am with the R bass, that's set to 80. So you might go, well, wait there, he's cutting and boosting at the same frequencies. Yes, that's an SSL trick. We always used to cut and boost at the same frequency. You come up, you high pass to where you want it to be, and then you boost. And it creates a sharpness, but it also means, yes, you're boosting 80, you are pulling up 40 to 60, but you're controlling it. Because if I just go to 80 and boost, I'm going to bring up this wide bell of a lot of unwanted crap. But if I control the low end going into it, I get a lot more focused. And it sounds good. If I take that off, now it's like horrific. Put it back on, still got the bottom end, but it's a little bit more bite. Listen to the bite, take it off. Now it's all just woo. So you understand what I'm doing. I'm cueing it into the R bass. I am also using a limiter quite aggressively. If I take it off, it's like unja. Put the limiter back on. It's now I hear banda as opposed to down. It's just evening up those hits. And again, that actually is going into that snare as well. So we're going to turn that off. I don't need that either. So that was sidechaining to the snare as well. Getting rid of that. But we do have a stereo reverb here. And I've got the floor tom pan to the left slightly. But it's feeding reverb on the right. I'm actually going to go and change this. Here, the R verb to a multi-mono. Aha. Oh, is there not a multi-mono of that? Well, that's interesting. Let's have a look here. Okay, no, we'll leave it here. All right. It's just with a multi-mono I can control. When you've got a multi-mono reverb, you probably know this, but I'll say it anyway. If you pan to one side, it will only see that side. If I pan to a stereo, I can send it to the left, but of course in a room, just because a clap's over here on the left-hand side doesn't mean the right-hand side is going to create reverb. It doesn't just go only to the left. Of course the right, sorry, is going to create reverb. So clapping over on the left, I still get over there. With a multi-mono, I can send it just to one side. So that's the reason why I would have probably opted for a multi-mono if I'd had it in that one. All right, and then the same configuration on the rack. Got time adjuster, pulling it back in phase. I've got the roll-off at 78. I've got the limiter controlling the dynamics, and that's going into an R bass. So I'm doing the same thing on both toms. There's just more low end on the larger tom on the floor to hit into it. Okay, the ride, I don't know if he ever plays the ride. Yeah, it's just in there lightly. I've got a mono overhead. The only thing going on that is a gentle 199 low EQ, which is the same as the stereo ones up here. So yeah, just really basic EQ. The hat has a time adjuster knocking it back because the snare hits are loud in the hi-hat mic. Even though he's barely playing the hi-hat until he gets to here. And that EQ is pretty high. It's going up to 400, high passing up to 400. It's quite aggressive for me. Okay, so the REQ on the mono 67, very low, but that's a mono room mic. The high rooms looking down on the kit are time adjusted ever so slightly. I think they're being brought back in just in phase with the mono 67. Nothing particularly dramatic. It just makes those three work together. And then the EQ is I'm rolling out low lows, just low rumble at 40. And the same thing, 66 on the low rooms. So not a huge amount of stuff going on there. The room master doesn't have anything on it. Anything else is on the console. Talkback mic was the actual talkback mic we used in the room. That's going up to 175. And again, not a great deal going on. Just time adjusted, so it's in phase with those other room mics. So naturally, the drums are quite natural. There's just it's not that much. It's just whatever's going on the console, which we'll get to. Cool. Okay, so what I did do is I added crashes where I wanted to exaggerate. I also added this explosion. So tambourine comes in here, and of course, as you heard, the clap. All right, and the claps themselves were recorded really natural using the room mics and overdubbed. There's a lot of high boost going on there. There's a high pass filter. And then there's the spread just to try and make them sit a little bit wider. And then of course, the Mac DSP Revolver reverb. We can take that out. The room mics make it sound pretty big, but this helps a lot. Great. And it's full 100% effect, completely off on the dry signal here. It looks like it says length 100, frequency, So it's just a pretty basic reverb. I like the Revolver for many different things. You can try whatever you have. It doesn't there's nothing special when it comes to those things. I use the Avid one all of the time. It's free, it comes with Pro Tools. It doesn't matter if you're in Pro Tools or Logic or Cubase or Reaper. Some of the free reverbs that come with this stuff and delays are completely and utterly usable and actually sound really, really good. I argue many times that the Avid plate is one of the best plates out there. Many of my friends use it. Okay, so the bass. It's where it gets a little fun. The DI. Pretty dumb tone. Use the time adjuster to knock it back in phase with the amp. EQ, got rid of all of the high end, so 156. And then I'm using several multi-bands just to control it. Not a lot going on there. Actually soloed it. You see here, a little bit of compression just to control that low. And I really, really do love the MC2000s. This one, a little bit here and there. So what am I doing? So what I'm doing with these multi-band compressors is I'm controlling the low end really heavily, just so that it's always consistently there. I find if you do that really nicely, you know, you'll end up, even when he goes high, still hearing those lows, because you're exaggerating those low frequencies and keeping them compressed and consistent. It's something I like to do. Okay, next up, and I think it really works well. I took a bass amp, and it's distorted, and it's at 200 and above. Put the two together. Pretty darn good bass amp. I'm tempted to change this slightly. No, it's cool. I mean, the amp's got all the personality. Yeah, tons of personality. So the low end's been removed, so it can be controlled from the DI. And the reason why I use the DI for the low end is just cleaner. I've been doing it for years, and I've been talking about it for years, and I know it's becoming very prevalent. I'm sure you've seen many videos of people over the last year or two talking about how they do it as well. I mean, I've noticed a big increase in that. It's like the acoustic guitar recording, you know, having the mic low down. I've been doing that for like 25 years, and now people are telling me it back like they just discovered it. This is what happens. This is our community. We share ideas, you know, but it's funny. You'll hear something, you'll show somebody, and a year later they'll show it to you, and you'll be like, yeah, I know, I showed you that. Get used to it. That's what's the great thing about our community. Okay, so now we have these three elements, and they are going through another multiband here. That's controlling the low end evenly. Not very much. There's some high mid boost here at 4K, 39. Some 800 for that honky kind of, take it off, that honky kind of precision-y tone. But then an R bass, take this off, it's quite dramatic. And again, I'm controlling EQ going into the R bass. You see, 70 here has been rolled off. There's some 800 boost. I just use the 800 boost in the API. I get asked this all the time. People say, why don't you just use one EQ to do all the boosts? It's like, well, there's the characteristics of this Waves API that I really like. Going into the R bass, and then, of course, an L1 limiter. And then another multiband. And I'm using it just to control some of the mid-range. It's this. Take it off. It's cool. But I like what it's put in, I like what it does to the mid-range. It's really, really cool. Okay, so that's a huge part of the song. Now, let's go out here to the acoustics. Now there's several, and they are more about parts. Like if I play them all together, you can hear it. Heavily layered acoustic guitars, all playing like, it's a very simple song structurally, chordally. Sorry. But what am I doing? I'm doing high boost on every single one, all the same. A little less on that. I'm doing some high boost and then some high pass filtering here. I don't need anything below 112 on these acoustics. Nothing. And it looks like I had reverb but turned it off, so that's it. So very simple. We'll go and look at the console and see what we've got going on there. Here's Tim with the spread on it. Just some beautiful, simple ambient stuff. Now, as far as electrics are concerned, you can see there's still the DIs. You guys and girls can have the DIs. They're just me strumming. That's still with Tim playing along. Tim also did add a rake himself here. Oh no, it's not a rake, it's an arpeggio. I was wrong. And then he's got this little driving guitar. Great part. Just really cool stuff here. In the verse, great. Just great stuff. Second verse. Now there's a limiter here, evening them out, but not a great deal of work. Any EQ or compression is going on the console. So again, really simple stuff. Only thing I will say is there's an echo boy on this. Which has already got. Oh, so what I'm doing is I'm delaying it by a 64th of a second, so you get this width. So that creates some stereo width. It's always difficult, you know, try to find an actual subdivision of the beat when doing that stuff. If you just delay it by a nanosecond, it can actually cause phasing, because you might have frequency like this, you know, waveform like this, and you just delay it slightly and it ends up making it sound like it's slightly out of phase. You've got to get to a point where it's enough away, like a 64th, that it sounds like a little bit of a slap. So if you want to do that widening trick like that, make sure it's at least a 64th away. Something far enough away, depending on tempo, obviously, because if it's super fast, 64th is that would cause phase issues. All right, and then there's an echo boy and reverb that I'm using on those guitars as well. Here you can hear this one. Oh, barely, I don't actually think it's on. Let's see if I, nope, didn't bring it on. So it would have been there as something to maybe use, but didn't get used. Great. So we're getting pretty close to the end of it, because it's now, all of this, there's some cymbal stuff and some riser stuff I did, but this is all done on Logic, and there is no EQ on it. The only thing I did with these effects, you know, is you're going to see where it goes through on the console, but the only thing I did was put some spreading stuff on some of the instruments, and the only other one thing I can point out is this synth bass decapitator. Quite a lot of drive, but it's moving so fast you can barely tell. So a lot of great keyboards. You guys and girls are going to have so much fun with these keys. I mean, like if I just solo this stuff here. It's all Logic. There's a sub for the Fireflies thing. The Fireflies thing was actually something David had. He insisted on using this. But see, what I've done is I used an MV2 to even out a little bit because it was a little quiet, distorted it with a decapitator, and then I got a spread on it. So what I had done is I basically just summed these two sounds together, because look, you've got this too. Cool, so we're almost there. Now here's a big one, the piano. So the piano is a Yamaha C7. It's a pair of U87s on it and a 414. And the 414 is in mono on the frame. So it's a little, you hear the frame, you hear a little bit of the aggression of it. Now there's quite aggressive EQ on this, between this and the console. Because you've got the low roll-off, it's high passing at 84. Again, high passing is important. High passing on 84, and then a bit 2.5 dB at 8500. So there's some, but then there's the MV2, which is really controlling the lows and highs dynamically, not the low and high frequencies. The dynamic range. So it's pushing up the low energy and pulling down the high energy, so there's a little less dynamic range. Really good. Now the reverb itself is the opposite. I've taken off a lot of the high end as opposed to the low end, just because it was getting really messy. Now there's another piano overdub here. Which works out great. So this is all organic. As you can say, nothing's edited, the drums aren't edited to Schnizzleland. Let's have, you know, everything. There's a lot of stuff going on. Everything is really, really super organic. I mean, it's like, yeah, look at that drum performance. That's just breathing. That's a real drum performance by a real drummer who knows how to play. Didn't go in there and heavily edited. Let this breathe. Let this be a really organic track, like an early Coldplay track, I think is what we were sort of thinking. Obviously, I worked with the Fray, so there's probably some Fray ideas in there, but no, we went totally different. Okay, so last but no means least are the vocals. Now, there's a lot of backgrounds, I think, that we should just quickly talk about first before we get into them, only because the lead vocals are more detailed, but not EQ'd on the console. So I did the vocal thickening trick and printed all of the vocal thickening to a stereo file. There it is. And then the actual bus, there's a little bit of high boost, but then there's a lo-fi, which is just distorting it. If I take that off, it adds a little, pretty tasty, that's all. So that lo-fi is on my vocal whoa-whoa bus. I like it. I like what it does. I don't need to use as much saturation as you might have to, because if you're in the box, you're going to want to use a little bit more saturation just to glue everything together. And if you're in Pro Tools, lo-fi is your friend. You can really do great stuff with just little amounts of it. You know, between using the distortion or saturation, you can either distort the high end or the low end first. They're very, very useful tools. And it will give it kind of some girth without having to go too crazy and lose tons of plugins. So, okay, so, and then of course, there's an echo boy and a reverb together, you know, with those. Take it off, on. So I really like what it's done. I think the echo boy and the reverb with the vocal thickening trick. You should watch my vocal thickening trick video if you haven't already. I assume you have, because it's one of our most popular. But between that and the lo-fi, I think it's really kind of a cool sound. So we have harmonies of the lead vocal.
Take off, show me the stars. I'm ready to leave. I'm ready to leave.
That's a straight double that I just put on.
Show me the road to the good life.
There's also in the
Wheels up, head for the future.
really softly, there's also one.
With the life
Pre-chorus, there's a harmony. Second verse, there's a harmony running all the way through as well. As you can see, none of those have any specific treatment. That's whatever's just happening on the console. Very, very straightforward. Those are all going through the background bus, except for this vocal here, just coming out 23, which is the vocal double, which is set up identically to the lead vocal on the console. All right, so now we get to the lead vocal. So we have the lead vocal itself up here, which has been split into 3 different tracks. The reason for that is it's just controllability, and if I wanted to turn things up or down, I could. Like here is a reverse vocal, for instance.
We're not gonna follow.
not gonna follow.
We're not gonna follow.
It's kind of a fun thing to do. So it's a reverse. It's a reverse reverb going into we're not gonna follow. Kind of a fun effect. Okay, so let's talk about the lead vocal. Last but no means least, the lead vocal.
The city
Arvox, it's been a favorite of mine for a long time. I've been using it since it came out, and I think when we did the second Frey record, I flew out to hang with Michael Brow while he was mixing, and he used it in the same way, right on the first part of the vocal. And that was how I'd been doing it. So to me, it felt like, oh, good validation, you know. High-end boost.
The city lights
7, 8K
far
nearly.
behind.
So these three vocals are all going into this lead vocal sub. Now, if you haven't watched my vocal mixing video, I'm going to take you through it here, but I definitely, you know, urge you to go and check that out on YouTube. It's called Mixing Vocals to Sit in the Mix, I think. But anyway, it's going into this sub. Now, why do I do a sub like that? Well, it's often because I might do a lot of volume automation and stuff. There's a little bit here going on, but I'll do it. You know, depending on how well the vocal's recorded. If somebody's giving me a vocal that has no compression on it and is all over the place, dynamics, the singer's moving off and on the mic, I'll go in there and, you know, either clip gain or do volume automation on it. So then that is feeding a sub. You know what I mean? So it's going evenly into a sub. It's like I'm controlling how it hits my compression on the vocal sub. So it's coming out. There's some more top end boost.
The city lights
de-esser
are far behind.
You'll notice I use EQ and de-essing a lot. I might brighten the whole thing, and then occasional things get aggressive. So I put a de-esser on it. And I'll brighten it again, and everything sounds better except for a couple of things. So I put a de-esser on it. It's an old trick. Lots of people do it. Then another EQ just to roll off. High passing.
Are far behind.
Renaissance compressor.
And I can see
it's actually on the
it
standard
now.
setting it comes on, giving us 2 to 3 dBs worth of gain reduction. Another Arvox.
The city lights
Take it off.
Are far
Back on.
behind.
It adds some girth. There's something about the Arvox which I don't think is talked about a lot, but it adds some low mids and some girth. Another de-esser.
The city lights are far behind.
Just pulling out a little nasalness at about 650.
Now.
Now I'm printing an Echoplex. Super quiet. I'll crank it for the heck of it.
And I can see it now that I'm on my.
You see, what I do is I take a tape delay like that and distort it really heavily and then bury it underneath. Usually I will line it back up with the vocal and just use it as a way to add some energy. Now I've got the vocal thickening trick, and what I did is after I printed the 3 sets, I bounced them into one. Again, super quiet.
Are far behind, and I can see.
You know, what I might do is automate it in choruses and stuff. I don't think I did in this instance, but often I'll use any of these effects and push them louder into choruses. I've got my, this is quiet too. Little automation going on this. Comes in louder on the choruses. This is from a Lexicon PCM 90. I have a setting called Vocal Magic and one called Echo Plate. All right, and all there is after that is this multiple set of effects, these reverbs, these delays. There's the Telray, which for the longest time came free. And what they do, what I love about them is they add, you know, there's a short tile room, which I usually use a short reverb, which is here, and it's at 0.65 of a second. There's the tiled room, and I'll use that mainly in my verses. And then I'll push a longer reverb, which I did slightly here. And it's an eventide, and again, lows and highs are cut from this one. And I'll push that hotter in the choruses. Then I've got an echo boy. I've got 2 echo boys going. This one's set at 16th notes. A little bit of distortion on it. But most importantly is I've got an R comp after it. So, what does that mean? I am sidechaining with the vocal. So what you do is you take your lead vocal and you send it to this compressor. This compressor is after your delay. So you send a signal from your lead vocal to that delay. So if you watch here, the compression, very, very low delay. But the point is, let's go somewhere where it's a little quiet, a little louder.
I'm ready to leave the city. I'm flat broke. Show me the road to the good life, the good life, the good life.
What it's doing, it's quiet, but what it's doing, I didn't really use the delays particularly loud here, but what it does by doing this sidechain compression is you can set up your delays, 16th notes, 8th notes, quarter notes, whatever you want to do, dotted triplets, you know, whatever you want to do. You can do all these different delays, but you put a compressor after them. So when he's singing ba 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 da da ba, it'll go ba 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 da da ba 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 da da ba 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 ba. The delays won't happen until after he's sung. You can have them there quietly, but as soon as he finishes singing, the compressor opens up and up come the delays. Sidechain compression on delays is fantastic. You can do sidechain compression on reverbs, on delays, you name it. So I'm doing that with an Echo Boy, 3 different Echo Boys. This one's got quarter note delays on it. This one's got another quarter note delay there, but they're different sounds. That's a Telray. This one is just a cheap, it's called cheap tape, and this one's called distorted. So the point is I've got 3 sets of delays, all fairly quiet, but all with this same effect on it, just giving a little bit of energy. So almost done. The only other things I can add is there's a vocal distortion. Don't know how loud it is really.
And I can hear the wind.
You can hear it there.
It will be alright now.
So all I'm doing is using, in this instance, a lo-fi, quite a lot of distortion, which for a lo-fi is quite a lot if you see that setting here. I got a de-esser controlling the high end. I've got an R-Vox, so it's evenly hitting it. I've got another EQ brightening the high end and another de-esser afterwards going into lo-fi. So it's pretty controlled. You know, again, I would say it's more about like controlling the tone that you want with the distortion. I could probably take a lot of that off and not make it quite so aggressive. But I liked it, and I messed around with stuff. The de-esser's barely coming in.
And I can hear
Here's after the R-Vox, here's the EQ setting you see there.
Alright now, wheels up, head for the future.
The reason why I'm trying to control that top end going into a distortion is like, I don't want lispiness, I don't want the high end to be too disgusting, you know? So I'm sort of controlling it going into my li-fi. Okay, here's the only other thing that I think is really worth noting, the last 2 things. The octave.
Are far behind.
You hear that?
And I can hear the wind.
So what I'm doing, I'll take off that boost I just did, but I'm going to pitch shift, I'm going down -12 semitones, so 1 octave below. I'm then running a gate, and the reason why I'm running a gate is I don't want the breaths to trigger this. I don't want to home, I don't know, city, light, home. So I'm gating, so it's only really hearing the major words. And then I'm EQing all the high end out, well, most of the high end out, so we're only hearing the low octave. That's a really good trick. The next one I love doing is the whisper track, which is I'm running a de-esser, but I'm going into a Vocoder.
And I can hear the wind saying it will be alright now.
I love that. To me, that gives the vocal some air, some controllability. I used to get a singer to sing that. Again, and I still do it on occasions when I have the time to do it. So he might go, now I go, city life. And it's great. When you can and you have the time and you're working on vocal production, you can add that. Okay, so those of you that have watched my videos will know that my system of doing things, you know, and I don't like to be too systematic, but there is a couple of things that I always do. So I've got a lot of boost here at about 60 hertz, a lot, 9 dB, a huge amount. I'm doing my usual cut, it's about 600, I suppose. I'm cutting that. I'm also boosting at about 2K, 2.5K, and I'm boosting at 8K. So quite aggressive. The EQ is being fed, if you go channel out, into compression. It's very SSL sound. It's to boost the EQ and then push it back with compression. It gives you that spanky SSL we love. There's also an insert on, because I'm using the kick here on the 560, I'm using that API EQ. This is feeding DBX 120, which is a sub-harmonic synthesizer. That appears on the console over here with the sub. And it just gives us that little extra low underneath. Now, I know people do this with an R bass as well, and there's many other things you can do. I've been doing it for years and I use that, but you can do it in other ways. Okay, snare. Again, same idea. This time I'm not going channel out, I'm going channel in. What does that mean? That means I'm letting the snare be compressed and then I'm EQing afterwards. So the channel comes from Pro Tools, comes into this channel, channel 2, the snare drum, and then gets compressed lightly and then is EQ'd. I've got a lot of boost going on at just over 100, about 160 dB. I am boosting also at about 250. So I'm putting some low mids and some lows on it, but I'm also cutting, high passing at about 80. So I'm boosting some super like 100 Hertz, some 220, but then I'm at about 80 here, I'm shelving. I mean, I'm high passing it. Next up, there's some boost at some 5K and there's also some boost at about 6K. So I'm boosting the high end of that. There is also an insert, and that again is going to another beautiful 560. And this 560, I'm boosting 125, a little 250, a little 2K, and a little 8K. So it's pretty dramatic. There's a lot of like doubling up on similar ideas. Okay, toms. I'm boosting, well, interesting enough, because the toms are panned independently, I'm boosting slightly differently on each. But I'm doing on the floor, I'm actually boosting around about 150, 140. On the rack, I'm boosting about 100. I'm cutting both at about 350, which is like ugly for me. Bring about 300, just cut it. And I'm cutting it dramatically, like 10, 11 dBs of cut. So I'm sucking out those low, ugly mids and boosting the lows underneath. I'm also boosting at about 4K, 4.5K for a bit of stickiness, and I'm also going up, boosting about 7K really dramatically. I'm then controlling at about 70 Hertz by high passing, and I'm also at 12 cutting, low passing. So I'm like basically creating this. I've got bottom end boost, but low pass, high pass here, bottom end boost, low mid cut dramatically, stickiness up here for the clickiness of the sticks, and then low passing here so there's no extra cymbal bleed. Speaking of which, cymbals. Overheads. The overheads, I am doing nothing on the lows. I'm cutting at 300, getting rid of that quite dramatically, nearly 9 dB. I'm boosting at about 5K and I'm also boosting at 10K, and then I'm also high passing at 120. That again is channel in, which means compression, then EQ. And that seems to work for me. I'm not looking for spankiness on my overheads. I just want that sound. All right, room mics. Room mics are quite dramatic. I'm boosting at about 100, but I'm also controlling at about 60. I've been high passing going into these. So, you know, so it's boosting some lows, but not like super, super lows. I'm also up to 70 on my high pass filter on here, but these are going channel out, so they're going EQ into compression, so you get a little bit more aggression out of them. I'm cutting, you guessed it, about 400, cutting some low mids. I'm boosting some 4K, and I'm also boosting about 9K. So I'm boosting, again, we're sort of doing this kind of, but we're kind of coming up and getting some air on the top of these. Bass guitar. Bass guitar is a couple of things. The main things with the bass is like nothing on the bottom end, because I've got an insert in. This insert is this. I'm doing a lot of 100 boost up here on this Pultec. It's absolutely beautiful. I am doing, there's a tiny bit of attenuation. So I'm boosting dramatically, but I'm also attenuating. So what does that do? That kind of tightens the boost. So if I didn't have the attenuation, it would boost, but it would be a very, very wide bell, if you like. doing this. So by attenuating it, you just narrow it a little bit. This is kind of a secret weapon. It really does make the bass sound freaking amazing. If there's one piece that I couldn't live without, it'd probably be this. Other than maybe the Tegler bus compressor. I feel like I could use this on everything now, but I think this I would miss dramatically from my bass. And probably the DBX 120. I feel like the low end is a secret, just getting everything to glue together beautifully. I think this is great for the bass, the 120 is great for the kick, and this is great for the overall mix. I could probably do everything else internally using using everything just in the box. And then there's some boost at 3K for some articulation. No attenuation, just some boost at 3K. So that really, and the bandwidth is pretty narrow. And that just kind of gives me the pick sound on the bass. Now, as far as what was going on the console, compression in, I'm at about 20 or 30 on the high pass, don't need anything below that. There's some 400 boost, and there's some 800 boost, and there's some 5K boost. So I'm adding some sort of low mids, and high mids, and then all the low end is coming off of that beautiful Pultec there with that huge amount of 100. Okay, acoustics. This is probably one of the most dramatic things to look at because we didn't do any EQ really. We just did some high boost using plugins. So here I've got a little 250 low mid boost, but I'm cutting high passing at about 100. So I'm doing some 250, just kind of add some there, but then I'm cutting low mids around about 300-ish, but I'm boosting at 7K, I'm boosting at 9K. So I'm giving myself a lot of air over the top, controlling the super lows, but giving myself a bit of low mids there. So it's quite a lot, and that's channel out. So that's EQ boosting, high-end boost into the compression on the SSL, which sort of pushes it back in, and it gives it the brightness without it sounding excessive. SSL channel out compression really is the secret sound. If you look at the yellow lights on here, those are all the channel outs. They get used a lot. If you look at Chris's mixes, CLA's mixes, lots of channel outs. It's not something that gets talked about a lot, but it really is the secret to the sound of an SSL. Rhythm guitars, which is the rhythm electrics I played and a couple that Tim played. Low boosts, low boosts at 200. Minor cuts at 800. And then minor cut at 2K, and then boost at 5K. They are high passed at 70 and low passed at about 10K. We don't need that sizzly top end on electrics. The lead stuff that Tim did, again, is 10K cut, a little high passed, a little bit more, up to about 100, boosting at 250, 3, cutting at 800, cutting at 2K, and boosting at about 6K. So you're getting kind of, again, you're getting that kind of control. A little bit higher there because it's lead stuff. We don't need the lows. We're getting quite a lot of high mid and high boost here, but it's being cut at 10K. I do not need anything above that. I want cymbals and stuff like that. I do not need electric guitars going zzz all the way up there. Okay, keys, where we've got a lot of stuff coming out. The keys are quite dramatic. There's nothing going on the low end here. So it's really, and there's no compression. It's the way I recorded it. So all you're really doing is cutting some low mids at about 300, cutting 1.5 some honkiness, but then boosting about 10K. So I'm boosting some super, super high up there. And then at 80 to 100, I'm cutting, and about 10K, I'm cutting. So I'm cutting the lows, high passing that, and low passing the top. All right, so the only two things really to talk about that are left, well, three things, are the piano, which I think is a big deal. The piano has no low-end stuff going on here, but there is some cut in the low mids, about 300 again. There's also some boost at 4.5, boost at 8. No, boost more like 9K, sorry. And then high passing at about 80, 100. Low passing at about 12K. But the big deal is this. And this is not cheap, but I'm throwing a pair of Pultecs on the piano. It makes quite a dramatic difference. I'm boosting some 100 Hertz, and I'm also boosting some 5K. Quite dramatically on the 5K. It's up to 4 on that and 3 with no attenuation. So it's giving it a very aggressive sound, and at 100 is being boost. However, if you check it out here, I'm also going up to about 80 or 100 and controlling what it's going in. So it's not really, it's like it's going to boost at 100, but there's nothing else really going to go on below that. So it just adds some girth to the track. I like what it does. I'm trying to clear out a lot of room down in there. I'm high passing really strategically to try and create some room for the low of the piano to breathe, but also for the kick and the bass. All right, second to last, but no means least, is the lead vocal, and of course the doubled vocal. They're treated exactly the same way. There's a 300 boost on the vocal. There's an 800 cut at about 3 dB, and then everything is highs. I've got 6.5K and 10K. And then I'm high passing at about 100. So again, high passing at about 100, pretty standard. You've heard a lot of 70, 80, 100s, you know, some 20. Lots of high passing going on strategically to remove that unwanted kind of rumbles and trying to clarify the low end for the kick and the snare and everything to breathe. All right, last but no means least, background vocals. What I did here, nothing on the lows, nothing really on the mid-range, just on the high mids I've got some 5K boost, and then on the highs I've got some 8K boost, but I'm going up quite high. My background vocals are at 120, a little bit above, like high passing about 120, and I'm going at about 10. So basically I'm controlling it, making them a little narrower. They're not as low as they could be and not as high as they could be. They're a little bit narrower. It's quite typical for me for backgrounds. I might make them even more mid-rangey like this. But usually I just do that inside of the DAW and just control it like that, and then, you know, keep this somewhere set like that. And it's channel in, so it's compressing first, then going into EQ. All right, fantastic. Hopefully your brain will not explode with all of this. You can compare my mixes to Ken's. There's also, of course, the finished album you can hear. This is really exciting stuff. So have a marvelous time recording and mixing. Thanks for getting the course. Enjoy the files, mix away, create some rock and roll history, and I will see you all again very, very soon. Have a marvelous time recording and